friends, this is Christopher Davis-Shannon, and today I'm going to teach you how to play the 1926 jazz standard Big Butter and Eggman. This tune was actually written for the great Louis Armstrong along with the singer May Alex, who he was working with at the time. You see, New Orleans was a port city, and the Big Butter and Eggman were the merchants that were coming in on the ships and selling commodities who happened to spend a heck of a lot of money. There was actually a play written the year before this in 1925 of the same name, but the slang kind of really caught on thanks to this tune itself. So if you want, as always, you can skip right to the end for a play along with the chords. In the next few minutes, we're going to be breaking down both A sections of the tune, the bridge, as well as the chord melody intro that I played at the beginning. This tune starts out with an 8-bar A section that repeats itself at the very end of the tune. So this little section is actually half of the song. But let's listen to it before we dive into what these chords are. It sounds a little bit something like this. The first vocal note is your open A string. It goes, I want Big Butter and Eggman way out in the west. So let's look at what's happening in there. It's not too bad. We're in the key of F and we're starting on the tonic chord or an F major chord. We're going to stay here for 2 full measures or 8 beats. And then we're going to do a very typical thing of the era. We're going to go up to a G7th chord. This is our dominant 2 chord. It just gives us a nice cycle progression to get us right back to that 1 chord. So we'll stay here as well for 8 beats or 2 measures. And then we're going to go to a C7th. But if you would like, for the first measure of this C7th, you can play a C6th chord because our vocal melody note is in fact the A, that is the 6th in our C6 chord. So it complements the melody really well. And then in the second measure of C7th, we can go to an actual C7th chord. And after this, we'll be resolving to your F major chord. And then our little turnaround is just going to be a G minor 7th, open 2, 1, 1, and then our C7th chord to bring us back to F. So let's look at how this sounds all together, nice and slow. So we're going to start on F chord and it'll sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's your C6th, C7th, and then F. Now G minor 7th, C7th, and we land right back on F. Now let's look at the A2 section, which is a slight variation from what we just did. So the A2 section in this tune brings us some new chords, but it's not terribly different from what we just did. We're just playing a little bit with both the harmony and the melody. So let's listen to this and see what the A2 section sounds like. Our first vocal note in this section is our open G string, which you'll note is not contained in our F major chord. So you really want to internalize this melody while you're singing it, so you make sure you start on the right notes. It's a little bit odd. It's going to sound like this. I'm getting tired of working all day. I want somebody who wants me to play. So let's look at what's going on here. We're starting in the same spot on an F major chord. But we're only going to stay here for 1 measure or 4 beats this time. And then we're going to go down to an F diminished 7th chord, which will be 1, 2, 1, 2. You'll note that these diminished chords repeat all over the fingerboard. So if you learn one diminished chord shape, you know every diminished 7th chord that you could ever possibly play. So we're going to go for this for 4 beats, and then we're going to go down to that G minor 7th, open 2, 1, 1. Note this is not a G7th, but a G minor 7th, not like it is in the A section. Do this for 4 beats and then C7. So let's try just those first 4 measures of the A2 section. 1, 2, 3, 4. Staying right on that C7th chord. And in the next 2 measures, we're going to stay right there on C7th. And if you'd like, much like with the first A section, you can use a C6th here because it does complement the melody well, but it doesn't give us that sense of motion that we want to get back to the F major chord. You can use a C6th here and it works very well. I want somebody who wants me to play. So we're going to play C6th or C7th for 2 full measures, and then we're resolved to an F, but we're immediately going to go to a C7th in the last measure. And this one does need to be a C7th. All right, so let's see what this entire A2 section sounds like by itself. Again, here's your starting vocal note. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm getting tired, working all day. I want somebody who wants me to play. Now let's look at what happens in the bridge section of the tune. So as we look at the bridge section of the tune, this is really one of the stock bridges that we see crop up in quite a few different tunes. We're going to be starting on the 1-7 chord, or an F7. So you just play your F, and we'll put down the ring finger on the 3rd fret of our C string, adding an E flat, giving us an F7. We're going to play this for 2 measures. And this is going to resolve to a B flat 6th chord, which you will note is exactly the same as what you played for G minor 7th earlier in the tune. Open 2, 1, 1. We'll be here for 2 full measures. And then we're doing something a little odd. We're actually going to go to a dominant 6th chord, or we're going to go to a D 7th chord, which we'll bar across, so it'll be 2, 2, 2, 3, and stay here for 2 measures. And what's happening is this D 7th, although it doesn't fit in the key of F, because we have an F sharp in the chord, it can't possibly fit in the key of F, but it leads our ear to the G7th that we're about to play next. You think whenever you're playing a D7th, it always wants to resolve to G, right? It's our dominant chord. So we're using that play and stepping outside of the key to push our ear to our G7th, which of course is the next chord. So we'll play D7th for 2 measures, then we G7th, and this is going to resolve right to a C7th, another one of these little circle progressions, just going round and round using dominant chords. So our last line of the bridge will be 2 measures of D7th, 1 of G7th, and 1 of C7th. So let's put down an F7th chord and give this bridge a shot. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. And a B flat 6, D7, and then G7. C7. And then as we resolve to this F, this final A section in the tune is identical to what we did at the beginning of the song. So you already know this last little part. This is a great tune to start off with if you're starting out with early jazz. It's a fun song with some challenging melodic lines in here, but doesn't use too many chords. So let's look at how we can do a little chord melody intro to get ourselves into this song. So one of the easiest ways to set up a tune as an intro is really just to play the melody itself, play the last 8 bars of it to familiarize our ears with what is about to be sung in a moment. So we put down our F major chord. Our first melody note is an A, which is already on the 2nd fret of our G string. It's also our open A string. If you're playing low G, that will work better for you in this context. But I do it this way, utilizing the high G, because I have it. So we're going to pluck that, strum, and then our next melody note is the major 7th, the E, our open E string. So we're going to lift up the first finger and pluck that, and then strum again. So here's the first measure of the chord melody. That's not so hard. Now our next measure really just goes back and forth between E and F. I'm leaving out some of the melody here. I don't think we need to play the whole thing. We just want to give a nod to it with the chords in here. So the second measure, we're just going to go back and forth. So it's going to be down, up, without the first finger down on the F chord. So we have an E in the melody now. Then we're going to put it down for the next downstroke, lift it up, put it back down. So let's just listen to that. All right, so here's our first 2 measures. Now, as we get up to this next one, our melody note over the G7th chord is actually our open A string. So we'll just voice the G7th chord as a G9, really, having that open A in there. So we're going to play that. And then we'll just put down our regular G7th chord. Although the melody note is a G, it's easier to just go up to B. So we'll go. And then what we're going to do on the end of this second measure is just come up and hit that A on the last beat. So here's what the G7th bars sound like. So we're just gonna have a little end on here on the A because that's gonna lead us to now a C7th chord. So we're gonna play just a regular C7th, then go up to C, 2 strums, and we'll play C7th, but we're gonna add the 7th this time on the 3rd fret of our G string, just to walk us back down to F. And then at the end we can just do a G minor 7th to a C7th turnaround. Now I've written out the tabs for this rather simplistically. I don't like to put a lot of rhythm in there, but you'll see that I'm certainly strumming different beats. If I'm not focusing on playing the melody, feel free to fill that space however you want. But here's how the little chord melody sounds like. So now we have the little intro. Let's try the entire tune. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. But if my dreams come true today, the sun is gonna shine. So